webbing and do outer joins. And just to make you aware that this is part one of a two-part implementation of full data mode. So when SP4 comes out in December, you'll see the second part where you'll be able to do inner joins and all sorts of other exciting things as well. But it's a full-fledged, in my opinion, kind of self-service, almost ETL type tool to allow you to be able to take that data set from different sources and put it into your web intelligence reports. And that's part of the reason why they're phasing out multi-source universes in 4.3, because with this capability, you won't need multi-source universes at all. But as complementary to that, right, there's also this capability called data profiler. And so data profiler is the tool that will allow you to actually view the data, right, before you decide what you're going to do with it and so forth. And that's what Renal is going to present on today. So
thank you, Paul. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So let me switch to the system so that I can show you right there. So as Paul said, that it's a new feature in Service Pack 3 in 4.3. So let me go into the document. I'm using one of the sample documents that came as part of the installation. I saved it so that I don't mess up with the original one. So when you look at any document, usually we had reading, design, and structure, and now we have the new data option. Okay. So just to make it very clear from the beginning that you're not working at the query panel when you're dealing with the data mode. You're actually in the report, but it's another mode, just like report, design, and structure. So let me get rid of the panel for now. I'll come to them later on. So this is how it looks like. And down below, they're calling this one, the screen is divided in two parts. You can see the lower part, they're calling it graph panel, because you have the sources, the data sources. So I have multiple queries. Some of them, the data source for some of them are Excel, some are Universe, some are freehand SQL. You have WebI document, you have text, and one of them is OData. So that's the source of the provider. And then you have the data provider. So from each source to the data provider mapping. So these are basically the queries you define when you build your WebI document. Okay, so the icon right here tells you that this is the query. So, and then it gives some information about that query, that this has 11 rows. I have already refreshed the query, so it has 11 rows, some has 8 rows, and so on. When was the last refresh? How long it took to refresh? And then you can go to edit query directly to the query panel from here. Okay, so we'll do that later on. But yeah, from here you can go to the query panel. And then it gives you the cube or the data provider. One thing I really like about this graph panel, and I think I'm going to like this more when I teach WebI to people who are new to WebI. It has always been a little tricky to explain that you have a query, and then when you refresh that query, you kind of imagine a data provider, a container where your data is stored. But that concept is so key and so important to WebI development. But with this diagram, I think this kind of graph, it's very visual for whoever is learning WebI and using WebI, that, okay, I have a data source. So it can be the Universe or an Excel. And then I have defined these queries. And from that query, when you run that query, I have a data cube of data that's containing that data. Okay. So that's the first view you get. And then when you select one, so for example, city details, you have this view up at the top. And I think at least until this version, they're calling it data set view tab. But so basically you're seeing like a graph, a more visual, and here you're looking at the actual data. Let me go to this one, a small one. Okay. And this is usually pretty fast because it's not doing any kind of formatting, reporting, displaying. It's just showing the data that you have. And normally, okay, so over here, you can have multiple views here, okay? So I'm going to start with this one instead of the state area for another reason. So whatever objects you queried, it's the data that has come back, and this is where you can see the actual data, okay? Now at the top, you can maximize this screen or minimize, and then you have two options here. One is the first one, activate or deactivate distinct values. So if your data is bringing duplicate rows, you can either show or hide the duplicate values by this icon. Okay. And then this is called the facet view. What facet view does, when you have multiple dimensions, it breaks up the data and into each by each dimension. So this is really where the profiling of data comes in and plays for you, that you can look easily that my store name has how many counts of data. And right now, the default view is to show the count of occurrence of each value. Okay, so I have 50 in my data cube. I have 55 rows that has eFashion Austin. I have 36 rows that has eFashion Boston Newbury. So that helps with your data profiling and really well that, okay, does this look right based on my business? B, what kind of charting or graphing or visualization will be best for this type of data? And also it gives you an immediate idea of how many unique values you have for each dimension. Before this, what you have to do is you have to create multiple vertical tables in the report to see this data. But right now, it does that for you immediately with a click of a button. But after you have seen the count of each value, unique values, you can actually change the aggregation, and you can see the data by any of the measures you have. So let's say sales revenue. So now you can switch the data from the count of occurrences to the actual measure value, any of the actual measure values. So if you have done data profiling in Universe before you're actually doing the WebI, or you're looking at, okay, sometimes you're given a universe where you don't know what kind of, like, which field do I need to use for what reporting? And a lot of times, it's you who has to figure everything out. You don't have a business person guiding you that, okay, this field means this flag means this. You have to look at the data and figure out what is it. So sometimes you may be fortunate to have access to the actual universe file, actual UNX files, but many a times you won't. That's where this will be very helpful. So this is very similar to the analyze and the data views that you can do in Universe when you right click show values. This is very similar to that. And then it, yep. You can see nulls. Yep. So I can, yeah, I'm going to combine later on, I'm going to combine, and then there will be a null in that value. Then I'll show you that. But yeah, so if there was a null value for state here, it would have shown as null and how many counts of that null is there. Is that,
Yeah, what about distinct?
so right now it is showing distinct. Yeah. So if it had any null value, that's what you're asking, like if there was a, yeah. Yeah. So this is really helpful when you have a view of the data like this, you know whether a table is good presentation for this data or a bar chart or something else. So that's the first thing you can do. And then of course there are other little things like you can zoom in, zoom out to get a better view of the data. I mean, of the graphs and everything.
And this is
Yeah.
available to those with edit or developer rights.
Yes, yes. So as I said, this is the moment you come to your report after you have run your query or defined your query, you come here and then you can switch to data mode and see this. Okay. You can change them. Like this graph is just a profiler, or you can define that like we use it for modeling and changing, you know, the. We can do a little bit of modifications. I'm going to come to that, but not a lot of modeling that you can do at the database level. But relationships or just we can do some. We can do some. So let me show you that. Yes, yes, in data mode you can manipulate.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a separate session, which is really interesting. Exactly talking about that. This is just the profile.
Yeah, and then from here you can actually go on to combine these queries. But before combining, let me do some transformation here. So the next part that you can do here is apply some transformations to the data. So I'm going to pick the smallest one, state area, just so that it's easier to see. See how the data is, original data says area, California, area, Colorado. But my other data sources have just California, Colorado, like that. So I want to match that. So this is where I can start my transformation. Without having to create any variables, I can replace, say, area, and then I'm going to replace with nothing. I'm also going to add a space because there is one in the data, and then click OK. And now my data is transformed to California, and that's it takes off that area, that text that I wanted to replace. Okay. And then I can apply further transformation, like I can change this to uppercase or lowercase. And there are a few other things that you're able to do here. You can also group your values. Just like you can do in your actual reporting, you can do that here as well. Excuse me. Okay. And then when you're here, you also have these side panels where you can see that, for example, I have made some changes to the state object. So it's showing this little icon. And when I go to the property panel or the design panel, it has a feeding panel within it. And it has an object property panel. And you can either change the name from here or change the qualification, or you can, from that FX icon, you can actually make some modifications to the transformations that you have already done. So let's say I don't want the uppercase anymore. I can get rid of that. Or maybe I want the uppercase, but I don't want to replace area. Or let's say I want to change that setting. So maybe from area, I want to change this to the state of California and state of Colorado. You can also, it's not going that far. So, and on the other one, you can reset as well. You can reset all the transformations that you have done. You can reset from here. Okay. And obviously you can add some descriptions in it. So I'm going to go back here and get rid of any text. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to remove the uppercase transformation as well. No. Okay. Save this. And then if I want to combine data, see if I look at sales details, I have California, Colorado, and this value I know. So now by looking at the data profiler, I can I can see at all my data cubes, how do the values look like? Okay, sometimes you have one query that has California and another query has CA. And you always run into those issues when you're actually writing code or reporting. But with the data profiler here, you can look at them all at once here. So I'm going to combine sales details and state area because they both have state. So using the control key, I'm selecting both. You can see the little blue highlight there. And then as soon as you select more than one cube, you will get this combine button activated. And when you do that, it lets you do the, it asks you, before I go into combine, this is kind of an in progress feature in SP3. Okay, so it has been improved apparently in SP4. So there are a couple of tricky things associated with this. I'll tell you about that. But what it lets you do is it lets you combine when if you have it's kind of merging dimensions, but you can do this ahead of time and you can merge on more than one dimensions here. But the main idea is same as merging, that if you have to synchronize measures across dimensions, this is where you can do. So I selected sales details first. That's why it assigned it as the primary cube. And the other one as secondary. You can always swap that from this icon. But what that means, and the default operator is left join. Okay, the other one is append. So when I do a left join, it works like a database join, a table join. And since they both have a common column, common object state, it has defined at the keys that state join these two cubes by state equal to state. And if you want to add more joining points, you can do that from add key. But right now I don't have any more. Okay. So let's see what happens here if I do this. Actually, let me swap this first. So state area and actually, you know what? Never mind. So just going with sales details as primary and secondary is state area. And then as I create, so it creates a combined cube. Okay. And now this has 696 rows. Okay, and 10 columns because 2 here and 9 here, and then one state is common. So I have 10 columns here and 696 rows. Now, if you look at the data here, so this is now I have highlighted the combined cube, and my data now has all the columns, all the objects from sales details and the additional one from area, which is the last one. Okay. And you can always change the names. And now this is a cube that you can do all the similar activities, like you can delete, you can remove the duplicates, you can look at the facet, and now you have, again, the similar statistics available to you for this new combined cube. Now, you can click on this more button and then delete or edit. So I'm going to go and edit. So first modification I'm going to do is swap this direction and update. See what happens now. I still have 10 columns, but now it's reduced to 8 rows. That's because now my driving cube is the state area cube. Okay? And it has only this 8 states. So now it's doing a join based on those 8 states. Okay. Now let's see what happens when you do an append. So append is more like a union between 2 queries. So it's just kind of, it has your one set of data, and then it teaches the other set of data with that. So I'm going to change this to append cube. And now it has 8 plus 696, 704 rows and 10 columns. Okay. And now you have a lot of nulls here and there because it's showing everything. Okay. And now if you have change to facet view, you will see that there are some null values as well. Okay. Now, let me show what happens in the main panel when you have done that. Go ahead and see. So now you have this new cube, which is the combined one. See the state area here, but for some reason, it's still showing up here, but what happens when you combine is it gets rid of the original cubes. Okay, so you cannot refer to these objects from these cubes anymore in your reporting. Oh, okay, I see. Thank you. Okay. So when you go to design mode, thank you. In design mode, it doesn't show the original. They call them parent cubes. So the parent cubes are kind of deprecated and you don't see them anymore here. So if you have already defined any variables or anything based on the original parent cubes, they will still have reference to the old one, but it will not work. So one of the issues with combined cube is that it doesn't it doesn't update the reference to the combined cube. You have to redo them. So for example, I think it still has the sales details state and the area, which is actually coming from the parent cube. But your sales details cube is not there anymore. So this is something you need to take care of if you use a combined cube. That you have to go to all your data assignment variables and update. Okay. Let me go back. Let me show my slides really quick. With some of the restrictions with the combined cube. So the first one is what I just showed you, and then certain activities actually closes your WebI server, like data tracking that now has combined cube or changing data type, etc. So if you're using that, then you might, and your WebI server stops or something, you might need to take a look at that. If you have geo dimensions that are part of the combined cube now, it loses the list of values. So again, if you have geo dimensions, go and take a look at that again. If you have merge dimensions, using the objects from the parent cubes, then SAP is not saying very clearly that it will not work, but they're saying it may or may not. So it's always a good idea to go and check if you had merge dimensions, and then if they're working properly or not. The transforms on the combined cubes are not supported in shared elements. And if you have WebI as a data source, if you're using WebI as a data source, then the transformed cubes or combined cubes are not exposed at source of data. And any delegated measures are not supported in data model. And that's all I have. So, any other questions?
It's more than different. In the sense that when you see something like that, like what you call it, 30+ years old, that kind of capability, two things come to my head. Why that one, but number two is you don't do that when it's here, stay. The best that kind of thing, and so forth. And, I've seen a lot of the other tools out there, like, tablet, stuff like that, where you can say, oh yeah, I've seen that kind of stuff. But now it's a wait, right? And now the user, right, can manipulate data in a whole new way without touching, right, anything, universe or the backend. It's kind of like, whoa. Like I said, why didn't you do that 10 years ago? But anyway, so questions.
Yeah. Have you? I've tested it a little bit, but not much. Obviously, if you have. One of the issues with merge dimensions that we found were multi-values. Has this alleviated some of those issues, or do we still get multi-values when we're using the left join?
This one's supposed to fix that. That it should be a true join. So, and I think in SP4 again it can change. So keep that in mind. Now, what I showed that your parent cubes will go away. I think in SP4 they're going to keep them. So you can still refer to the objects from the parent cube. And it's hard to say at the moment whether that's a good thing or a bad thing without experiencing the issues. But with this one, I mean, right now I can speak, I think, for both sides, that there's a good side of taking them away. So you're you have more cleaner design. Once you merge, then you want your users to use the merged ones, like the only objects that's coming from the combined cube. But there are times when you want to use the original ones in there. If you keep the original ones, then that might be helpful. But that can get tricky. But yeah, this is very helpful when you have like no access to universe, no access to It takes time to make any changes happen in the database on the universe side. This is very helpful. And any transformation, I think, is always better done at the source level, at the ETL level. But it might take 6 months to what you need to even get there. So at least you have this now. Yeah.
Mentioned geo dimension. I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with geo dimension.
Okay, so let me show you. So
Oh, is that?
it's any idea, John, why it's not? I'm gonna plug this one out and then. Okay. So you see this little globe icon here? So any location related dimension, when you bring in, from the value, we know it's location, but WebI doesn't really know that it's location. So if you want to show a map, kind of a graph, it doesn't know how to map. So with the geo dimensions, we take the original dimensions and then we define this to be a geographical dimension. And normally it maps very well, but sometimes you may have like a duplicate name across multiple states. You resolve those little issues, and then you can use that as part of any kind of geo maps. Yeah. Right. If no other questions, thank you.